Bollocks! 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 Welcome to all our chums out there from Toyah and Robert, your deeply unqualified agony aunts with a pile of more useless answers to a few of your burning questions.
Thank you everyone for your questions this week and for all of your support. For us it's been a tremendous week, mainly because of the response to Sunday Lunch. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Mandy, you ask, if you were in a horror movie, what would it be?
A history of the music industry.
Is that a horror movie?
If it were made, it would be.
I think it would be a very brilliant movie to make, and I think people would be so surprised at how hard the industry is on the one group of people that counts, and that's the creatives.
As I say, it's a horror movie waiting to be made.
If we, as a couple, were to be in a horror movie, we both agree we'd like to be in Border, which is a Scandinavian movie. It's phenomenal. It's beautifully acted, gorgeously filmed, and it's about trolls who are...
Two trolls who were brought up as human children. And there is an interesting gender reversal within this. But
don't give it away, don't give it away. It's absolutely stunning. It explores so much about human nature and sexuality, even though it is about trolls. So it's a lovely one. And I would love to be in anything to do with Alien or Predator. I adore that franchise of movies. Stu Winfield, why do kangaroos grow antlers?
I have a theory, Toyah.
Please tell us.
Kangaroos are switching to a pescatarian diet, and they have grown antlers to catch flying fish in the outback.
Oh, I think they're there to hang themselves up so that they can get dry.
That's just as feasible.
Eric Evans, this is for both of us. What kind of things do we like to read, and do we have any recommendations?
Oh, yes, lovey.
So I always say Stephen King. I adore Stephen King's prose, but I thought it's about time that we talk about the incredible writer Michelle Faber. When I first read Under the Skin, I was so incredibly inspired and blown away by the beauty and the brutality of the writing that I went out and bought about 10 copies of this book and sent it to everyone I know, including Bill Rieflin, who was on tour with REM at the time. Michelle is a friend of ours. We know him, and we're not sure if he's ever going to write again, but this is probably what you'd know him for, The Crimson
Petal and the White.
The Crimson Petal and the White. I can't read it in the camera, it's the other way around. Which was made into an utterly brilliant TV drama. His writing is breathtaking, and he just doesn't compromise on his art. So if you're looking for someone new and you haven't come across Michelle Faber, that's my recommendation. All the letters from her are in here. I've just got to show you this. We had a flood about 10 years ago, and the water only hit a box of precious letters. That's the only place the water landed, going down 2 floors. And this is a letter from Michelle, and it was hit by the water, which is really, really upsetting. So I keep all his letters in our books.
All right, now I have some recommendations from my current reading list. The first is Travels with Nasruddin by Tahir Shah.
Good man.
Highly recommended. By Anthony Blake, The Intelligent Enneagram from 1998, and Anthony's working on the 2nd edition. By Dr. Anthony Hodgson, Systems Thinking for a Turbulent World. Highly recommended engagement with systems theory and future thinking for the practitioner as well as the thinker. And A Definitive History by Adrian Gilbert of POWs in Europe.
Jimmy McCoy. I love Robert's Dorset tones. And so glad we have Dorset rock stars with this beautiful dialect.
All right, well, throughout my life having left Dorset, I have been somewhat ribbed, not in a cruel way, but a few impersonations have also been offered by chums I've worked with. But actually, my Dorset accent is fairly light if you actually know real Dorset accents. For example, that of Mr. Elford, who was a wonderful gardener when I lived at Fernhill House in Witchhampton from 1980 until 1987. And Mr. Elford was not actually a Witchhampton man. He moved from Blandford when he was 4, so he wasn't quite viewed as local.
How many miles from Blandford to Wimble?
This was to Witchhampton, about 7 or 8 miles.
Oh, so he definitely wasn't local.
Not at all.
In England, we have hundreds of dialects.
Yes, well, Mr. Elford, I went into the garden to consult with him, and Mr. Elford was also the beekeeper who took care of the hives that we had. And Mr. Elford said to me, "Bees has gone like dinkum they was, all legs up digger with pollen." And I said, "I beg your pardon, Mr. Elford?" And he said, "Bees was going like dinkum they was, legs all digged up with pollen." And I said, "Oh, Mr. Elford, were the bees going like dinkum, their legs all digged up with pollen?" And he said, "Whoa, yes, no, like that."
Do you know this is the last jar of honey from those hives? So we've been together 35 years.
Yes.
And when I met Robert, he had cupboards full of this honey. It is the elixir of life. And honey lasts for thousands and thousands of years. Will we ever open this?
Who knows? That's an interesting one. It would take something very important for that to happen.
Thank you for that question, Jimmy. Denise Loveridge, do we have any pets?
Oh, over to tea on this.
Get your hankies ready. Willie Fred flew away from this world about 4 years ago.
Oh, it must be more.
5,
really.
probably 5. One day, I've always had white rabbits. I've had throughout my life, I think about 9 or 10. They've always been upright ears, white rabbits, pink eye. Very hard to find these days. Always a buck, because the bucks behave badly in a really charming way. So Willie Fred left us after 9 years of being with us, I think 2016. So you asked Denise, would we and do we have any pets? I am so maternal and desperate for another white rabbit. And if I can't find a white rabbit, then perhaps a chinchilla. But we don't like to cage our animals. So I know a chinchilla would eat all the artwork and be going everywhere. So in answer to your question, we would love pets. But we're touring musicians. And in the film clip of Bunny eating banana, there's suitcases behind him on our landing. Those are never unpacked. Only the washing comes out, gets done, goes back in, and we're off on the road again. So it's quite hard for us to have pets.
Yes, it'll have to be in the future, Lovey.
And Robert was pretty resistant to Willie Fred coming into the house. And then once Willie Fred came into the house, it was inseparable love at first sight. Those two were never apart. Russell James, when is my solo album, Posh Pop, coming out? And he also says, does anybody know when Posh Pop will be released? Is it new material or old revamped? It's completely new material, written in lockdown in the last 12 months, between myself and my writing partner, Simon Darlow. We prepped the music, we got the vocals on, and then we got Robert Fripp in to play whatever he wanted over the tracks, and he reinterpreted the tracks. May I let you explain?
Well, Bobby Wilcox turned up, may I say.
Okay, Bobby Wilcox, because we just don't want the press to say, this is a Robert Fripp album, this is a King Crimson album. We need Robert to be seen as a musician who isn't just anchored to one genre of music. So for this album, we all decided it would be best if he became Bobby Wilcox, so he's known for what he's done on this album and not historically for anything else?
Well, I go in, they put up the tracks, we pick a section and I rock out. And on some it's gentle and singing, and on others it's spraying some burning fire.
If Robert can play 11 notes a second on Fracture, he certainly lived up to it on this. And this is modern rock music. It's not written in strange timings. It's very accessible, high-end kind of danceable pop. And you have just been breathtaking on it.
I've enjoyed it immensely. It's lots of fun and a little more to go too, I hope.
He's been so good, I think he could go out on tour as Bobby Wilcox. Sergio, if you had the power to bring to life a famous person and spend an hour with him or her, who would you choose and why?
Archibald Armstrong.
Who?
Archibald Armstrong was the jester to King James I of England, King James VI of Scotland. And when James made the procession into England in 1603, following the death of Elizabeth I, because Archie had been a little too near the knuckle for King James and had upset him, Archie was banned from standing on English soil. That is, James was leaving him behind. So when he crossed over into England, into the first town, looking up, what would he see but Archie's buttocks out of a window up there mooning the king? So he called Archie down and said, "I told you never to stand on English soil." And Archie replied, "I have Scottish soil in my boots."
That's amazing. Did Archie break wind a lot?
I can't possibly say, dear, but he was the model for the Fooling King Lear.
Brilliant. That's such a great answer. For me, it would be Jim Morrison. And I would just like to ask him how he felt when the instant fame of the Doors happened, because for some reason Jim Morrison went into self-destruct, and obviously a very brilliant creative songwriter performer, but it pressed his buttons being in front of that kind of flame of fame. And I would love to interview him about his perceptions during those years and why he became so self-destructive. A phenomenal legend of a man. Keith Clark, you ask, what were your major music influences before you were in your respective careers?
Well, I'm assuming this implies before we were professional. So going back to 11, Elvis and Scotty Moore, Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, moving to trad jazz when I was 13, 15, Parker, Mingus, Django Reinhardt along the way, Ellington, and then the Beatles and Bartok.
Let me rephrase this, because he says before our respective careers. So one of your very first jobs, Robert, was you were an estate agent.
Well, I was an estate agent when I left school at 16, but I was also doing gigs with what were called beat groups at the time.
For me, the very first and only job I have ever had was adding up the sums at Legal and General Insurance in Birmingham. They were pretty simple, basic sums, and I managed to do them. And within a month, I earned enough to go to drama school for a year. So I left. And my influences during this time were actually people like Kool and the Gang, because I went to a lot of discos and just danced every night to keep my sanity. I love movement. I love dancing. So it would have been T-Rex, Roxy Music, David Bowie, Alice Cooper, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, and then when I hit the dance floor, it was either Sister Sledge or Kool and the Gang. I didn't mind if it made me want to dance. But as we've moved through our careers, obviously influence has changed. And I remember in the late 80s, early 90s, when I first heard the trio Bulgarka, these three phenomenal female voices that treated the vocal cords as a kind of call of the sirens, and it just changed my whole perception about singing and how to use the voice. And of course, once I moved to London at the age of 18, Patti Smith, Lou Reed, the Rolling Stones, early Human League, astonishing music, and Julian Cope, and in Spiral Carpets, who I adored during the 90s. So thank you very, very much for those questions. And I want to thank the former Harvard science professor who got in touch, and Mr. Axel, who wants to help me write the book about prayer, meditation and creative thinking. I just contractually have to deliver a solo album and make 2 movies before I can think about that book. But your offer has absolutely given me confidence in doing it, and thank you very much, Mr. Axel. What is the magic chord today, Robert?
All right, magic chord, here we are. But how to get to it? So, maybe it's an A7th with an F sharp in it. So we could say it's the 13th, but arpeggiated, bollocks.
Do you want me to play it? Because I've been learning arpeggios this week.
My wife can now play this much better than I can.
But I haven't got the guts to do it today. Perhaps next week.
So here we are. And that's it for the magic chord this week.
That was very short. Can we just hear it again, please?
All right, I'll play it the other way.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Here we are, upside down.
Everybody, thank you so much for your brilliant support, your astonishingly great questions. We are thinking of you. Reach out if you need to talk. It's so important. And we will see you tomorrow for Sunday lunch. Yes. And we will see you next week for Agony Aunts. Bye from me, Toyah.
Bye from Robert, and please be well and stay safe.
Stay safe, everybody. Lots of love.
But how to get to it?